Maririnig ko yun.
Hey guys! We are going to discuss about
The concepts of DRR and DRRM.
Let's go to DRR. DRR stands for Disaster Risk Reduction. It discusses about reducing and preventing different kinds of disaster through examination factors of disasters. Through DRR, it leads to reduced exposure to hazards, lessen vulnerability of people and assets, effective management of land and the environment, and improve preparedness for adverse events. But it usually requires thorough planning across sectors and must be united with general, national, and regional development strategies. DRR strategies usually begin with plans for assessing the hazards and risks, the extent of harm that would occur, the vulnerable people's capacities to cope from the disaster.
While hazards are inevitable, which may result to loss of lives and damaged or destroyed properties, DRR contains steps and guides for the prevention and reduction of disaster risks.
Number 1. Disaster. Disaster is said to be a serious disruption of the functioning of a community or a society involving widespread human, material, economic, or environmental losses and impacts, which exceeds the ability of the affected community or society to cope using its own resources. In other words, one is called disaster if it disrupts the normal functioning of a community or society, which may involve different impacts and results for the community to deal and manage.
Disasters can be a combination of many things like hazard exposure, the circumstances of vulnerability, and the lacking knowledge and measures to reduce the negative effects.
The impacts of disaster can be devastating, such as loss of loved ones, injuries, epidemic diseases, and other effects of human, physical, mental, and social well-being, alongside negative effects such as damaged properties, loss of services, social and economic disruption, and degradation of the environment.
Example, an earthquake disrupting a village. After the earthquake, lives are lost, many people are injured, and psychological traumas arise, together with loss of services from the local government. This is considered a disaster as it disturbed the normal functioning of the village.
Number 2. Risk. Risk in general use is usually placed on the concept of chance or possibility on an event and its negative consequence, such as in the risk of an accident. In this aspect, risk is the possibility of harmful effects, such as unexpected loss of lives, people injured, livelihoods, disruption of economic activities, and damages to the environment as a result of interactions between natural or human-induced hazards and vulnerable or capable conditions.
You are at risk.
Number 3. Hazard. Hazard is an event, occurrence, phenomenon, substance, human activity, or condition that has the potential to cause harm to life, results to injuries, or other health impacts, damage property, and the environment.
Hazards can be single, sequential, or combined in their origin and effects. Each hazard is known by its location, intensity, probability, and likely frequency, how frequent it occurs. The hazards of concern to disaster risk reduction are hazards that arise from a variety of geological, meteorological, hydrological, oceanic, biological, and technological sources, sometimes acting in combination.
For example, a huge rock that might fall down to a near barangay. This hazard may kill, cause injury, or damage properties.
Number 4. Vulnerability. Vulnerability consists of conditions determined by physical, social, economic, and environmental factors or processes which increase the proneness of a community, school, or certain area in a locality or place to the impact of hazards that affect the ability of communities to respond to events.
So, going back to the rock on top of the mountain, the barangay is vulnerable to the impact of the hazard.
Number 5. Capacities. Capacities are the strengths, attributes, and resources available within a community. society, or organization that help individuals, families, and communities to mitigate, prepare, respond, and recover from the hazard impacts of disaster. It may include infrastructure and physical means, institutions, societal coping abilities, as well as human knowledge, skills, and collective attributes such as social relationships, leadership, and management.
Hazards are always present. So, in order to reduce the disaster, we need vulnerability and risk assessment. These are some factors that can affect the vulnerability of a community: political, economic, physical, social, and environmental.
Political factors. A community's vulnerability can be linked to political will and commitment to developmental concerns. Vulnerability increases when there's the lack of access to resources, infrastructure, basic services, and information.
Economic factors. Economic status also relates to the capacity of a community to cope and recover from adverse effects. Poverty has the single most important influence to vulnerability. Therefore, poverty eradication and creation of sustainable livelihoods are essential part of disaster risk reduction.
Physical factors. For example, poor physical environment expose people to hazards such as landslides, floods, fires, wind, disease, and epidemics.
Social factors. The level of education, training, safety and security, information and awareness, cultural beliefs, traditional values contribute to social well-being. Lack of awareness and access to information can result in increase of vulnerability.
Environmental factors. Scarcity of resources in a community can reduce the coping solutions and recovery from a disaster.
Now let's go to the concept of DRRM, or Disaster Risk Reduction and Management.
Proper preparedness is carried out within the context of disaster risk reduction management and aims to build a strong capacity needed to capably manage the disasters from prevention to sustained recovery.
Reducing the risk of disasters will be more accurate and successful if we manage it step by step. Before a disaster, there are 4 phases to be considered: prevention, mitigation, adaptation, and preparedness.
Let's first discuss the prevention. Preventing means avoiding the potential adverse impacts of the possible disasters through action taken in advance.
Next is the mitigation. This process to lessen and limit the impacts of hazards and related disasters. The disaster impacts cannot be prevented fully, but the level of severity can be lessened, like a clean environment, fixed furniture and appliances, and others. Mitigation involves a wide range of elements, starting from your house to engineering techniques to environmental policies and even public awareness.
Adaptation. It refers to the adjustment of individuals to their surroundings. For example, villages near Mayon volcano. Every time the volcano is erupting, it is expected that they should evacuate immediately. They should know well and adapt to their environment, because if not, they will not be ready, especially if the disaster happens frequently. This definition addresses the concerns of climate change and is sourced from the Secretariat of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change.
Lastly, for the pre-event for disaster management is the preparedness. These are measures for the people to prepare and react appropriately during and after such disasters.
Number 1. Planning. Disaster management plans, contingency plans, mutual aid arrangements.
Number 2, advocacy. To inform with a certain goal that will help the people to be prepared and ready. These are done through dissemination using mass media, seminars, conferences, observing and being aware of the Disaster Consciousness Month.
Number 3, education and training. Proper training and knowledge of disaster management, such as drills in schools, offices, universities, and buildings.
The event of a disaster response is key. Disaster response are not just emergency services and public assistance, but also the response of the community during or immediately after a disaster to save lives, reduce the related impacts, protection of property, deal with the immediate damage caused, and to provide the safety of the public and the basic needs of the people affected by the disaster.
These are activities associated with response. Early warning. This is the quick dissemination of warning to the community or society. Notification of response teams are also done.
The golden hour principle. It is the time which most lives could be saved and the damages could be minimized.
Incident command system. It is the management of disaster operation activities.
Recovery. It is the restoration, improvement, and renovation of facilities, livelihoods, and living conditions of disaster-affected communities. The rehabilitation and reconstruction begins here. The process should be based on pre-existing procedures and methods for effective recovery action, which will be more successful.
Rehabilitation. This includes the process which are done to restore affected communities to their normal lives, physically and even psychologically. Rehabilitation does not only talk about the people, but also the facilities, buildings, and other infrastructures to be fixed.
This can be classified into two. Short term. It is the restoring of the necessities needed by the people such as power, communications, water systems, transportation, and providing the basic human needs like food, clothing, and shelter.
Term. This restores the economic activity, balancing and leveling the life, reconstruction of community facilities and housing, development, healing in a system which will have a lesser vulnerability to future hazards.
This information is from Teach Together and the Disaster Risk Reduction and Resource Manual of the Department of Education, Republic of the Philippines.
Please check our other videos.
Thank you for watching.
Bye!